And at number 5 on this list, we have the Wildheart Barbarian. At first glance, you might not recognize the name Wildheart, but the short version is, it's just the Totem Warrior subclass renamed. To briefly go over what the Totem Warrior Barbarian does, it basically allows you to choose from a list of different animal spirits that will grant you certain benefits. Some are provided while raging, while others are always online. Let's take a look at your 3rd level subclass feature, Bestial Heart, which is more commonly known as Totem Spirit in 5e. Overall, each heart or spirit all work functionally the same, providing a variety of buffs while you're raging. Bear grants you resistance to all damage type except psychic. Eagle lets you dash as a bonus action and invoke disadvantage on opportunity attacks made by enemies. Elk increases your movement speed. Tiger increases how far you can jump. And Wolf grants your allies advantage on melee attack rolls against enemies within a certain distance from you. However, they all now grant you a special action that you can perform while you're raging. Bear gives you a once per rage second win that costs an action and restores 1d8 plus your constitution modifier hit points to keep you up just a little bit longer. Eagle allows you to use your action to dive down into a creature from high ground, letting you ignore fall damage while also dealing damage to your opponent and knocking them prone. Elk allows you to use both your action and movement to deal 1d4 plus your strength modifier damage to a hostile creature in your way and potentially knocking them prone. Tiger lets you use your action to cleave up to 3 enemies in a small cone, dealing half your weapon damage and applying a damage over time effect. Lastly, Wolf lets you use your action to boost the movement speed of all allies within 30 feet of you by 10 feet. Just like the Berserker Barbarian, these changes only add extra options you can do while you're raging that don't just come down to attacking the same creature again. And they can give more of an incentive to actually choose another spirit over the obvious choice of Bear, since taking half damage from all but one damage type in the game is insane at even higher levels. But the options get even crazier when we look at your 6th level feature, Animal Aspect, or Aspect of the Beast for Totem Warriors. There are way too many options that Baldur's Gate 3 adds to this feature that going over each one that you can choose would make this section way too long. So here is a list of all of the aspects you can choose from in 5e compared to what Baldur's Gate 3 lets you choose. In short, the main 5 aspects, Bear, Eagle, Elk, Tiger, and Wolf, are still present but have been tweaked to fit the gameplay of Baldur's Gate 3 more easily. For example, Eagle normally lets you see up to 1 mile away without any difficulty, but since there's really not a way to make this portion of the aspect work in a way that would make sense in a video game format, it instead now gives you advantage on perception checks and dark vision. Since you're only allowed to pick one aspect, Baldur's Gate 3 compensates for this by completely removing and replacing your 10th level feature, Spirit Walker, which just lets you cast the Commune with Nature spell as a ritual, and Additional Animal Aspect, which, as you might have guessed, lets you choose a second animal aspect to benefit from. But there is one more change to go over with the subclass. Just like the Shadow Monk, Wildheart progresses a little differently than its 5e counterpart, in that you also gain the Landstride Difficult Terrain feature along with your normal ASI/ABI, which allows you to ignore difficult terrain full stop. You don't even have to be raging in order to do so. Now, what we've gone over are all the changes from Totem Barbarian to Wildheart. Let's go over why this subclass takes number 5 on this list. The short version is that these changes add a lot of ways to customize your experience as a Barbarian. The longer version is that with the number of options added to just your 3rd level feature, it creates a sense of variety and versatility that incentivizes you to tamper and toy with, especially since Baldur's Gate 3 allows you to respec your character. One of the main draws of Totem Warrior Barbarian is being able to choose a subclass, but it feels different every time you play a new one. However, because certain totems were clearly better than others, that diversity ends up being muddied and ends up leaving the other aspects or spirits collecting dust. And while Bear still remains a really powerful option as a Wildheart, especially since it now has a way to heal itself even just a little bit, the special action granted by your Bestial Heart while raging are good enough that it might make you think to try another Bestial Heart as well. So why exactly is Wildheart number 5 on this list? Well, just like the Shadow Monk, these changes take one of the more powerful classes in the game and make it an even better powerhouse. The big difference here, however, is that it's not just quality of life changes and a new ability. There are just a whole bunch of new options that have been introduced that can drastically change how you play the subclass. You can make a Barbarian take advantage of the bleeding mechanic in Baldur's Gate 3 by choosing Tiger Heart and then taking Tiger and Wolverine as your animal aspect. Or you can try and take advantage of being poisoned, frightened, or charmed by picking the Honey Badger animal aspect and rolling for that free rage. There's just so much you can do with this subclass than ever before, which more than makes Wildheart Barbarian deserving of a spot on this list. At number 4, we have Way of the Four Elements Monk. This subclass is widely considered one of the weaker subclasses in the entirety of Dungeons & Dragons 5e, due to all of your choices of spells being very limited in use, as well as how taxing casting these spells can be for your main class resource, your key. Basically, the way Four Elements works is you're given the ability to learn Elemental Attunement, a sort of reflavored version of the Druidcraft cantrip with some minor differences. while also learning one additional elemental discipline starting at 3rd level. And then the rest of your subclass levels let you choose another elemental discipline. And while there are a few spells that are good to take as a 4 elements monk, such as Fireball and Cone of Cold, this also creates another problem with the subclass. Why would you ever take something like being able to cast Gaseous Form over being able to deal mass amounts of fire damage by giving yourself the ability to cast Fireball? So what this creates is an end state where your character basically takes the best spells and abilities they can, because if you don't, you're really only relying on your base class features, which defeats the whole purpose of having a subclass to begin with. So how does Baldur's Gate 3 treat the 4 elements monk? Well, firstly, not only are there a few new elemental disciplines available to choose from 3rd level, such as by taking Blade of Rime, giving you the ability to cast Ice Knife, you are also allowed to pick 3 disciplines rather than 1 plus elemental attunement, giving you more wiggle room and versatility. Some of these disciplines even work a little different than their 5e counterpart. Fangs of the Fire Snake is an action that, for 1 key point, lets you hit a creature from 20 feet away, dealing your unarmed damage plus 1d10 fire damage to the enemy, while also causing your next melee attack to deal an additional 1d4. This is both a buff and a nerf of the original version, since 5e's versions extended the range for unarmed strikes by 10 feet instead of setting them to 20 feet, but would remain for every other attack you make that turn. Then you can spend an additional key point per melee attack you hit in order to deal an additional 1d10 fire damage to those attacks. This is one of those features that is considered a must pick for 4 element monks, since adding an additional 4d10 fire damage total on your turn at the cost of 4 key points is the most efficient use of key points this subclass has. So while having an increase in range in Baldur's Gate 3, the loss of having the ability to just add 1d10 fire damage all of your attacks keeps it from being an absolute must pick, especially when you consider that some disciplines can modify existing spells. For example, Chill of the Mountain is a new option added in Baldur's Gate 3 that lets you spend a key point to cast Ray of Frost that deals 1d10 cold damage rather than 1d8. Shapen of the Ice is also a new discipline that you can choose that lets you conjure a 5x5x5 cube of ice that you can use to climb to higher ground if you need to, adding to potential mobility options to the subclass. There's also another feature you can get for taking this subclass called Harmony of Fire and Water, which is an action that allows you to regain half of your key points once per long rest while not in combat, which is a huge boon to monks since that's an effective 50% increase in the amount of key points you can use without needing a short rest. Lastly, a nice bonus to the subclass is the additional ability to use your bonus action Unarmed Strike whenever you cast any of these spells, which allows you to fully commit to casting a spell without giving up all of your monk features. At 6th, 9th, and 11th levels, you can choose one more discipline as normal, but reaching 6th and 9th level in particular also provides brand new discipline options and buffs in some instances. At 6th level, Embrace of the Inferno is added, which allows you to cast Scorching Ray, which isn't normally available in normal 5th edition D&D. Upon reaching 9th level, a plethora of spells you cast are automatically upcast by 1 level, and your Water Whip's damage is increased by 1d10, which is nice because there's no rules for upcasting this spell from your discipline in Baldur's Gate 3 as there are normally. This is arguably better since you don't have to spend extra key points to upcast your spells like you normally would. You just get them a little bit later as a trade-off, but makes the subclass progress feel a lot more natural. Overall, these changes and buffs from the original version of the class makes Way of the Four Elements feel much better in terms of progression, while trying to fix one of the key problems of the class, its key points, by allowing you to restore half your maximum key points without needing a short rest, while also making the upcasted version of spells more key efficient by not requiring you to spend extra key points in order to do so. While this doesn't make Way of the Four Elements stronger than any other class, the buffs provided to the subclass help put it more on par with the other hybrid subclasses by giving it more options and versatility than ever before. If this was a list about most buffs a subclass received, this would probably be much higher in this list along with Wildheart Barbarian. But since this list is more about how much stronger these subclasses are in Baldur's Gate 3 in comparison to the original counterparts, the Way of the Four Elements monks basically goes from being barely playable to a subclass that looks both enticing and well balanced to play, which is why this subclass earns a spot on this list. And at number 3, we have the Abjuration Wizard. This wizard subclass is meant to be one where you create a ward of magical energy that you can use to protect yourself and, eventually, others from taking damage. They do so by using their 2nd level feature, Arcane Ward, which also happens to be the primary focus regarding the changes it's received in Baldur's Gate 3. But to understand how these changes impact the Abjuration Wizard's overall usefulness as a whole, let's look at what the Arcane Ward does in 5e. Once per long rest, whenever you cast an Abjuration spell 1st level or higher, you erect a barrier around you that has hit points equal to your wizard level plus your intelligence modifier, and lasts until you finish a long rest. Then, anytime you take damage, the barrier absorbs the damage, taking priority over your temporary hit points and your actual hit points. And if the barrier's hit points reach 0, you take any remaining damage. However, you can restore hit points with Arcane Ward by casting an Abjuration spell that's 1st level or higher, restoring hit points to the ward by twice the spell level. This is extremely useful for giving yourself additional bulk in a pinch and combos well with a few spells. If you take a level in Warlock and grab Armor of Agathis, you can use your higher level wizard slots to create a strong Armor of Agathis barrier that can grant you 5 temporary hit points per spell level and activate your Arcane Ward at the same time since it's an Abjuration spell. Once you do so, any damage you take is delegated towards your Arcane Ward first before reaching your temporary hit points. And if the attack you took was a melee attack, the damage portion of Armor of Agathis will still proc since you still took damage. This is a great way to prolong your Armor of Agathis as much as possible, making you a rose with thorns in the battlefield that melee-oriented creatures will think twice before attacking. And because Arcane Ward is taking damage away from you, you're also immune to making concentration checks until the Arcane Ward's hit points are reduced to 0, and you start actually taking damage. There are a lot of fun ways to make use of the ward, and you can eventually use your reaction to send the ward to an ally that's about to take damage from an attack using your 6th level feature, Project Ward. So, what does Baldur's Gate 3 do to the Arcane Ward feature? Well, firstly, it no longer acts as a secondary health bar, so to speak. Instead, it works on an intensity system where you can increase the intensity of the ward by casting an Abjuration spell, raising the intensity by the spell's level up to a maximum of twice your wizard level. So, whenever you take the subclass, your Arcane Ward has a maximum intensity of 4, but each long rest resets the intensity down to your wizard level. So, 2 in this case. And if you cast a first level Abjuration spell while the intensity is below 4, it raises by 1. As for what intensity does, in short, it's a flat damage reduction. Specifically, whenever you take damage, the amount of damage that's reduced is equal to your current intensity. So, if you're at max intensity and you take 5 damage, you subtract 4 from that and take 1 damage instead. After that, the intensity of the ward reduces by 1. This is by far the most unique change to how a feature functions, but it's one of the best and even strongest changes a subclass could get. To explain, at 2nd level, whenever you first get this feature, by default you only reduce a total amount of damage by 3, assuming you aren't using shield, mage armor, or other abjuration spells, since you start off at 2 intensity, which gets reduced to 1 whenever you take damage. Compare this to the 8 hit points your Arcane Ward will receive in the 5e version if you start with 18 intelligence. However, this scaling on Baldur's Gate 3 version is insanely powerful, that if we compare it to 2 8th level wizards using the same stats, with one using the original 5e version of Arcane Ward while the other wizard is using the Baldur's Gate 3 version, you'll see a clear difference between their power levels. If we assume 20 intelligence, an 8th level wizard with 5e's version of the ward will still have 21 hit points that it can absorb, assuming no other abjuration spells are cast to restore any of these hit points. Meanwhile, for the other wizard, at a default intensity of 8, the ward will reduce a total of 36 damage before it needs to be recharged. But it gets even better. If we were to include the amount of hit points restored by abjuration spells, Baldur's Gate 3 version wins by miles. If you use your reaction and cast shield while using the original version of the ward, your ward would only regain 2 hit points since it's a first level spell. However, if you're at 8 intensity and use shield, the intensity would increase to 9, allowing you to reduce another attack by 9 points, which is effectively another 9 hit points you have on yourself. This creates a situation where you really want to play around with the higher intensities since you can get more value for increasing the intensity of the Arcane Ward than at lower intensities. And if you manage to max out your intensity at 16 at level 8, then you just become an absolute tank for a good long while as you're able to produce a grand total of 136 damage, which is absurd but not likely to be obtained, at least for now. But there is one downside with this new Arcane Ward when compared with the old one, which is that the new Arcane Ward isn't as effective in taking larger hits as the 5e version, since the 5e version has a much bigger pool of hit points overall. While the new Arcane Ward is most effective against multiple smaller hits, if a creature decides to make a big enough hit or scores a lucky crit, you're not going to get as much use out of the ward as you would the 5e version. However, this brings into question whether it's better to protect yourself from one big hit once or several smaller hits several times over. And in most cases, unless you find yourself in combat a lot, the bigger Arcane Ward from 5e probably would be more enticing. But if you're going for a Gish build where you mix in a bit of martial fighting into your build, then Baldur's Gate 3 version is going to benefit you more in the long run, especially since multi-classing exists in the game, allowing you to take a level in Warlock and gain Armor of Agathis, which is now a stronger combo than ever before while using the newer version of the ward. This new change also indirectly buffs your 6th level feature, Projected Ward, because it gives you more of a chance to use it multiple times over the course of combat, rather than risking popping the ward by blocking a single attack. And remember when we said the ward's maximum intensity would most likely never be obtained? Well, meet the new and improved Abjuration subclass feature at 10th level. Before, it just allowed you to add your proficiency modifier whenever you use counterspell or dispel magic. Now it increases your Arcane Ward's intensity by an amount equal to your wizard level whenever you take a short rest. And while your short rests are limited in Baldur's Gate 3, You can immediately start the delay with 10 intensity, then short rest to immediately increase the intensity of the ward to 20. And since this isn't a once per long rest feature, you can just regain more intensity whenever you feel the need by taking your next short rest. Overall, Abjuration Wizard has received the biggest upgrade on this list so far by completely changing how Arcane Ward works, and then creating a new feature that just makes it even better by changing how improved Abjuration works. While it's always been a subclass that liked to play around its ward, the buffs and changes it received in Baldur's Gate 3 is arguably overtuned by giving you flat damage reduction that scales down to the point where it gives a new meaning to the term Mage Tank, which is why the Abjuration Wizard takes number 3 spot on this list. And at number 2, we have the Beastmaster Ranger. This subclass has a notorious reputation for being the worst subclass of the worst class in the entire game, at least at the time of its initial printing. Since then, Rangers have been granted several optional features they could take to add to or replace existing features once Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was printed, so they're not nearly as bad as they once were. Tasha's also included Primal Companion stat blocks for Beastmaster Rangers, rather than choosing from a challenge rating 1/4 or lower beast via the Ranger Companion feature to try and bring their power levels up as well, which it did, but the subclass still suffered from many of its core issues. For one, your action economy falls into shambles by having to use your action to command your companion to make an attack, for instance. Once you learn extra attack, you can also replace one of your attacks to command your companion to also attack. And since your weapon attacks are most likely going to be stronger than your own companions, it's basically a waste to command your companion to attack in combat most of the time. While the Primal Companion feature does sort of fix this power gap, you still have to use your own action to command it. Overall, the Beastmaster suffers a lot from not being as strong as it could be for a pet class, simply because a lot of the features you learn don't really provide much in the way of an upgrade for your class. At 7th level, you gain the Exceptional Training feature, which lets you use your bonus action to command your companion to dash, disengage, or take the help action on its turn, but only if you choose to forgo your companion's attacks. Also, your companion's attacks are considered magical as well. And at 11th level, your companion may attack twice or use its multi-attack, which is essentially shut off up to this point if you choose a companion that's included one, like the Cave Badger. And at 15th level, you can affect your beast with a spell effect that targets yourself if it's within 30 feet of you, which can be useful if you happen to have a way of cast something like Haste on yourself. So, how does Baldur's Gate 3 handle Beastmaster Rangers? Well, for one, you no longer select what your companion is based on a long list of CR 1/4 beasts. Instead, you have 5 separate stat blocks you may choose from Bear, Boar, Dire Raven, Wolf, and Wolf Spider. All of these companions come with their own strengths and weaknesses, and their own level progression where they gain new stats and abilities that you can have them utilize in combat, and can be switched out for a different one once per short rest. Additionally, your companion no longer requires you to use your action to command it to make attacks. They can just take their entire turn as any other creature would. Another buff the Ranger's companion receives is that your companion has the Prey Scent trait that allows it to also benefit from your Hunter's Mark spell, granting it an additional 1d6 damage whenever attacking a marked creature. And if your companion's hit points reaches 0, you're able to summon it back after a short rest rather than spending 8 hours to replace it like you would have in the 5e version of the feature. There is one downside to come from these changes, and that's the fact that your companion no longer benefits from your proficiency bonus when making saving throws, while your companion's AC, attack rolls, and damage rolls don't gain your proficiency bonus until they reach 5th level. But the rest of the changes kind of helps balance things out. If you take a look at Baldur's Gate 3's version of the Exceptional Training, you'll notice that your companion can now take the dash, disengage, and help action as a bonus action, rather than using your bonus action to command your companions to do these things while foregoing their attack to do so, which helps tremendously with action economy, although they do seem to lose their magical attacks in exchange. In fact, most of the changes of Beastmaster Rangers seem to focus more on allowing your animal companion to act as its own creature and entity, rather than attempting to work as an extension to the ranger. It is no longer tied to your own action economy and can make its own decisions in combat essentially. Even your 11th level feature just allows your companion to make an extra attack whenever they take the attack action, which is technically the same as the original version of this feature minus the ranger needing to forgo one of their own attacks to make it happen. But to really hammer home just how much stronger the Beastmaster Ranger is in Baldur's Gate 3, let's go over at least one of the animal companions you can summon, so that you have an idea of how companion progression works in the game. The Boar Companion comes with 11 hit points and 11 AC, and can make a tusk attack that deals 1d6 plus 1 slashing damage to the target. Alternatively, it can make a charge attack against all creatures in its way, dealing 1d4 plus 1 slashing damage, and has a chance to knock them all prone. At 5th level, your boar takes on a new appearance and obtains new abilities. It gains Rage, which works the same way as a Barbarian class feature, but gives it a flat +2 bonus on all of its melee attack damage for the entire game, rather than scaling based on level. While raging, the boar gains a bonus action Frenzied Strike attack that deals 1d6 plus 2 slashing damage. Also, at this time, your boar's hit points become 27, AC becomes 14, and its strength score increases by 2. At 8th level, your boar's hit points become 51, but its AC stays the same. Once you reach 11th level, however, your boar's appearance changes once again, and learns another new ability it can learn along the way, increasing its hit points to 85, its armor class to 17, and increasing its constitution score by 4 points. Kick Up Muck is an action your board can now do that reduces the movement speed by half and induces a -2 penalty to dexterity saving throws and armor class to all creatures within 30 feet of cone if they fail the dexterity saving throw against it for 2 turns. The boar also gains an extra attack via the Bestial Fury feature, which you can learn upon reaching 11th level, which is a nice bonus. In conclusion, the Beastmaster Ranger goes from a subclass that has a hard time figuring out how it wants to progress as a pet class to a subclass that seems to have most, if not all, of its problems ironed out. Action economy feels more fluid, and treating the animal companion as its own entity that grows stronger alongside you are just 2 of the main things the subclass does that makes it feel a lot more versatile and unique, while also making it a great option of a subclass for rangers in general. But the reason this subclass does not take number 1 spot on this list, however, is because the Beastmaster Ranger makes a couple of sacrifices in the process of becoming as strong as it is. Your companion not having magical attacks and not being able to gain a bonus to their saving throws using your proficiency can have a real negative impact on your animal companion both offensively and defensively. However, due to its better scaling in terms of hit points, and the fact that your companion's AC does increase over time, this sort of mitigates at least some of the losses made with this new and improved Beastmaster Ranger. And while this is a significant power boost for the subclass overall, it's not as significant as the top spot on this list. And for our number 1 pick, we have the third and final subclass feature for monks in Baldur's Gate 3, the Way of the Open Hand. This is a subclass that's normally considered a decent subclass to choose, but features one of the best subclass features in the game, Quivering Palm, which has a chance to one-shot enemies regardless of how many hit points they have by spending 3 key points to force a Constitution saving throw. However, since Baldur's Gate 3 has a level cap of 12, Quivering Palm is impossible to acquire since you learn it at 17 normally. Instead, the game sort of rebalances the entire class to compensate, but you won't feel these effects until 6th level when our first change comes into play, including a new subclass feature to play with. First, let's go over the changes to our existing feature, Wholeness of Body. Originally, Wholeness of Body allowed you to restore hit points to yourself equal to 3 times your monk level once per long rest. This works the same in Baldur's Gate 3, but comes with one additional benefit. It also restores half of your maximum key points while also applying a temporary buff as you enter a state of wholeness for the next turn, granting you 1 additional key point per turn that it's active. As mentioned before, being able to restore key points without taking any kind of rest is a huge boon to the monk class in general, as it allows you to use things like Flurry of Blows and Stunning Strike more often. Remember when we talked about how messing with action economy can be kind of dangerous according to the DMG? Well, Wholeness of Body turns that up to 11 by also granting you a second bonus action while under this feature's effects. This combos extremely well with your new 6th level feature, Manifestation of Mind, Body, and Soul, which gives you 3 toggleable abilities that lets you deal an extra 1d4 plus your wisdom modifier in necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage, depending on which manifestation you've toggled. You can only have one of these toggled, but the damage isn't once per turn, and you can apply it to every unarmed strike you make, including those with your Flurry of Blows, which you can use twice now while under the effects of Wholeness of Body. To put this extra damage into perspective, at 6th level you'd already have extra attack, allowing you to make 2 attacks whenever you take the attack action. Then you can Flurry of Blows as a bonus action to make an additional 2 unarmed strikes, which normally gives you a total of 4 attacks. Then you can use Flurry of Blows once more to make another 2 unarmed strikes for a total of 6 attacks per turn, which would amount to an extra 64 plus 6 to your wisdom modifier on all your attacks if they connect. And even though Wholeness of Body does cost your action, Flurry of Blows was buffed in Baldur's Gate 3 to allow it to be used even if you haven't made an attack, unlike how it currently functions in 5e, which still gives you up to 4 unarmed strikes you can use using 2 of your bonus actions. This is an insane power increase for the Open Hand Monk, since it's not only a flat damage increase to all your unarmed attacks, but also has amazing damage type coverage, with Psychic being the best of the 3 types in most cases. But the changes don't stop there. Just like a few of the subclasses on this list, you gain an extra subclass feature at a level you normally don't in 5e version of the game, in this case at 9th level, called Key Resonation Punch, which works similarly to Quivering Palm, but a bit weaker to compensate for being a crowd level 9 instead of 17th. Basically, when you land a hit with either of your attacks via the attack action or your bonus action unarmed strike, you not only deal your normal damage, but also cause the creature's key to resonate with yours for 1 minute, or until you use Key Resonation Blast to detonate the resonating creature as a free action, While making creatures resonate does not cost you any key points to use, using your key resonation blast does cost you 1 key point to use. When you do so, one creature within 60 feet of you that you're resonating with detonates, forcing a dexterity saving throw against it and all creatures within a 16-foot radius of it, dealing 3d6 force damage while also detonating any other resonating creatures that happen to be caught in the blast, potentially causing a chain reaction of key explosions against a wide group of enemies. This is another amazing ability and a perfect substitute for Quivering Palm since it does so much at almost no cost to your key pool. And with the bonus action buff to Wholeness of Body, you can potentially cause up to 4 enemies total to resonate in a single turn and detonate them all at once depending on how well the enemies you hit are grouped up. The reason why this class takes #1 spot on this list should be obvious at this point. Like Thief Rogue, giving any class an extra bonus action is just asking for trouble. And while the Thief Rogue is able to make good use out of this extra bonus action with its cutting actions, the Open Hand Monk can not only make excellent use out of its extra bonus action as well, it also has so much combo potential that synergizes perfectly with the rest of its kit that this class might actually be considered overpowered if it was an officially printed subclass in 5e. Even with the downside that you only have this extra bonus action for 3 rounds, there is just so much you can do with it. Having Wholeness of Body be a healing option, a key restoration option, and extra action economy bundled into one action is insane, even with it being tied to a once per long rest. That's not to mention Manifestation of Mind, Body, and Soul acting as a toggleable hex that automatically adds extra damage to all of your unarmed strikes, allowing the Open Hand Monk to outdamage most classes in the entire game. When it comes to how much stronger a class is compared to its original iteration in 5e, the Open Hand Monk is worthy of its spot on this list simply because of how much of a powerhouse it becomes from all the changes it receives in Baldur's Gate 3. Alright, and that's the list. There are plenty of changes that didn't make it into this video, but what have been some of your favorite changes in Baldur's Gate 3? And do you have any ideas for future top 10 videos just like this one? If so, we'd love to read them down in the comments below.